Before we begin, if you enjoy long-form World War II stories told like an audio documentary, please like the video and subscribe now. It genuinely helps these stories reach more people who listen all the way through, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. This channel works like a podcast. The images you see are minimal and secondary. The story is the experience. Germany, April 1945. The war was ending everywhere at once, but no one told the boys. In a small village near the northern edge of the Harz Mountains, 16-year-old Karl Weiss lay awake in the loft of a half-collapsed barn, staring down at the dark shapes of 7 other boys scattered in the straw below him. None of them slept anymore. Sleeping meant dreaming, and dreaming meant remembering things they were trying not to think about. Karl's stomach hurt constantly. Not the sharp pain of hunger he remembered from weeks earlier, but a dull, hollow pressure that never left. Hunger had settled into his body like something permanent. His uniform hung loose on his frame. His hands shook even when the air wasn't cold. Below him, one of the boys shifted and kicked a loose board. The sound echoed loudly in the stillness. Every body froze. For a long time, no one moved. They had been told to stay there. The German lieutenant who gave them that order had sounded exhausted even as he spoke. His uniform was wrinkled, his boots scuffed. He talked about duty and defense, but his eyes never met theirs. Karl remembered noticing that. That lieutenant left before dawn. So did the older Volkssturm men. The ones who preached sacrifice during the day and whispered at night when they thought the boys were asleep. By morning, rifles lay abandoned against fences. A helmet rested in the mud behind the church. Authority disappeared quietly, without ceremony. The boys were alone. Just before sunrise, the ground began to vibrate. At first, Karl thought it was wind. Then, the vibration deepened, slow and heavy, traveling upward through the earth, through the barn beams, into his chest. Artillery. Someone below whispered, barely forming the words. They're coming! No one asked who. Engines joined the distant rumble. Heavy engines, mechanical, steady, not rushed. The Americans reached the village just after first light. Karl didn't see them at first. He heard them take the village apart piece by piece. Tank tracks crushed stone on the narrow road. Boots struck pavement in calm rhythm. Orders were shouted sharp but controlled. A loudspeaker crackled near the square, delivering German words with a foreign accent. Civilians were ordered inside. Weapons were to be surrendered. Resistance was over. Karl pressed his face against the hay and watched through a crack in the boards. 2 American soldiers passed the barn. They were tall, broad, clean. Their movements were precise, confident, practiced. They didn't shout. They didn't run. They looked like men who had done this many times before. That frightened Karl more than violence would have. The takeover was fast. No fighting, no chaos, no spectacle. By mid-morning, the village was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Watched, controlled. The boys stayed hidden all day. Hunger gnawed at them. Thirst made swallowing painful. The air in the loft grew thick and stale. Every sound outside felt like a warning. Karl imagined the barn door flying open, soldiers dragging them out, lining them against the wall. Near dusk it happened. A voice outside, a shadow crossing the doorway, a rifle barrel appearing through the open door. They were ordered down, slowly, hands visible. Karl climbed down the ladder on legs that barely felt real. He expected a blow. It didn't come. He expected shouting. There was none. They were lined against the barn wall and inspected quickly. Rifles were taken, helmets removed. A soldier's expression flickered briefly when he realized how young they were. Then they were marched away. Through the village, past shattered buildings, past civilians watching silently from behind doors and curtains. Karl had never felt so exposed. His uniform felt too big, his body too small inside it. They were taken to the local schoolhouse. Karl recognized it immediately. He had sat in those classrooms before the war. Chalkboards still bore half-erased lessons. Desks were shoved aside. Classrooms emptied and repurposed. They were searched carefully, not roughly, efficiently. Armbands were not commented on. They were locked into a classroom. No explanation was given. Later, someone passed through with water. Tin cups, nothing else. The boys drank greedily and sat against the walls, waiting. Carl did not sleep. Every time Boots paused outside the door, his heart raced. He waited for names, accusations, punishment. The door stayed shut. Night fell. Hours later, the door opened again. American soldiers stood in the hallway, faces tired now, voices low. Orders were given quietly. The boys were told to stand and follow. Carl's fear spiked. Movement meant something was changing, and change had never meant anything good. They were marched into the street. The village was almost completely dark. Only a few windows glowed faintly behind curtains. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then fell silent. An American truck idled nearby, canvas sides pulled tight. Carl understood immediately. They were being moved. He had heard whispered stories about night transfers, about prisoners taken away where no one followed. They were helped up into the back of the truck. Not rough, not gentle, just practiced. Carl stumbled climbing in, his legs weak. The interior smelled of oil and canvas. Wooden benches lined the sides. The tailgate closed. The engine growled. The truck lurched forward. No one spoke. The road was uneven. Each bump sent pain through Carl's spine. He tried counting turns, memorizing time, anything to orient himself. But fear made everything slippery. Someone nearby began to tremble violently. Carl leaned into him without speaking. The truck finally slowed, stopped. The tailgate dropped. Cold air rushed in. They were somewhere else now. A fenced compound. Floodlights snapped on suddenly, blinding. Carl froze, certain this was where everything would turn. Instead, they were guided inside a large building. Echoing. Cold. Older prisoners were already there, sitting quietly. The boys were separated again, placed in a smaller room at the back. The door shut. No one slept. Morning came gray and cold. Boots stopped outside and the door opened. "Rouse!" Out. The boys were marched into an open yard and lined up beneath bare trees. Helmets gone, coats unbuttoned, breath visible in the cold air. Carl stared at the ground. Minutes passed. No shouting, no accusations, just waiting. The waiting stretched until it became unbearable. One boy began crying softly. Another whispered that this was just the beginning, that punishment would come later, away from civilians. Carl believed him. An American officer approached, counted them, spoke quietly to another soldier. Then he stepped back. A medic stepped forward instead. That confused Carl. The medic walked slowly down the line, studying faces, hands, knees. He stopped in front of Carl and noticed how thin he was. The medic said something quietly. Crates appeared. Still no order. The medic knelt, opened one crate, took out a piece of bread, and ate it himself. Slowly, deliberately. Then he gestured. Carl's hands moved before his thoughts could stop them. The bread was warm, real. The first bite made his eyes sting. Another boy ate too fast and doubled over. No one laughed. The medic crouched beside him and waited. Blankets were handed out. Someone carefully placed Carl's helmet aside. They were not punished. They were processed. Separated from adult prisoners, registered as minors, given food, water, and rest. Through broken German and gestures, the boys were told something Carl had not heard once during the entire war. It was over, not soon. Now. That morning stayed with Carl Weiss for the rest of his life. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. Decades later, when asked about the war, Carl never spoke about uniforms or slogans. He spoke about silence, fear that stretched endlessly, and the moment it stopped. That morning taught him something no speech ever had. Wars don't end when armies lose. They end when someone chooses not to punish a child. If you stayed to the end, subscribe. And tell me, where are you listening from?